Trapped in a snowstorm deep in the woods, veteran trucker Mark Jensen watched as a pack of wolves emerged from the shadows, silent, deliberate, and far too close. But instead of attacking, they did something no one expected. What is it, and what did they leave behind that changed his life forever? In today's video, we journey deeper into this true wilderness. Let's start. January had never been crueler. For 2 weeks, temperatures stayed below -30, with cold that cut through clothes and froze the trees like ice sculptures. Winds screamed across the northern wilderness, testing machines and people. Mark Jensen, a rugged 42-year-old trucker, had spent 15 years hauling supplies through this frozen land. He had faced whiteouts, avalanches, and frost that split metal, but nothing matched the silence that followed him after the accident. 5 years ago, black ice caused the crash that took his wife. Since then, Mark lived on the road, trading warmth and family for solitude and diesel hums. This time, he wasn't driving for money. A remote village needed medicine. With a storm coming, only someone stubborn or brave would take the risk. Mark didn't hesitate. Before dawn, he hit the road while others stayed sheltered. It should have been routine, just snow, silence, and another delivery. But deep in those woods, something was waiting. This trip would be different. Mark chose duty over comfort. Have you ever made a similar decision that changed your life? Comment and chat with me. But what happens the night before a journey into the unknown? Sometimes, the signs start long before the road ever begins. On the crucial night before his trip, Mark couldn't sleep. A strange feeling nagged at him. The silence in the roadside motel felt off. He'd never seen his fellow truck drivers like this before. Usually loud and restless, now they stared quietly into the dark outside the windows, as if waiting for something they couldn't explain. The wind howled like a wolf, scratching at the branches by the window like a warning. Mark checked the weather forecast 3 times. It predicted a heavy snowstorm, but he had to deliver an urgent shipment of medicine to a remote village by morning. They were counting on him. In moments like these, Mark felt the true weight of his job. While others slept in warm homes, he was out in the snow-covered wilderness, connecting distant places like an invisible thread of civilization. Mark fired up his old truck on a chilly morning, with dawn painting the sky in pearl and lavender. The beast rumbled to life like a giant waking from sleep. The thermometer read 37 degrees below zero, and the radio warned of an incoming storm. With every mile, the silence grew louder, and soon, Mark would realize that something was already out there, watching. The forest swallowed the road. Thick pines and spruces lined each side, their branches heavy with snow. As Mark drove deeper into the wilderness, the world narrowed into a tunnel of white and gray. The storm, once just a warning, had arrived. Visibility dropped fast. The snow didn't fall gently. It came in bursts, blown sideways by the wind, hiding everything ahead but the next 10 feet. The radio crackled, a hiss, then silence. He tried again. Nothing. His partner Jim, a veteran driver with decades on these roads, was supposed to meet him at a checkpoint an hour up the route. But the signal was gone. Whether Jim was behind, ahead, or stuck somewhere between, Mark had no way of knowing. This forest was so remote that on a good day you might pass 2 cars in 3 hours. According to the U.S. Forest Service, these parts of the northern wilderness average fewer than a dozen vehicles per day during winter storms. Mark's truck rumbled forward, slow and steady. The tires gripped the ice-coated road, chains clinking in rhythm with the wind. Every few minutes, he glanced at the dashboard, eyeing the temperature gauge. At -37 degrees, even a small breakdown could be serious. Inside the cab, the heater blasted warm air, but frost still crept along the edges of the windshield, thin white lines like veins across the glass. Mark wiped at it with a gloved hand, but the cold pressed on. Then, something caught his eye. Just beyond the edge of the road, barely visible through the snow, were tracks. Not from a deer or moose. These were wider and deeper, larger than a man's boot, and they didn't run in a straight line. They looped and curved like something moving in circles. Or following. Mark slowed the truck and leaned forward, watching the trail disappear into the trees. He didn't speak, didn't reach for the radio. He just tightened his grip on the wheel and kept driving, because sometimes when the wilderness starts watching, it's better to keep moving. Just when he thought he was alone in the blizzard, the wilderness reminded him, it never truly is. But what stepped into his path would defy every story he'd ever heard. Before exploring, I have a special 10-second request for all of you listening. If you can help me in any way, just hit the notification bell and hit that subscribe button. It helps this channel so much. And if you do that, I will do everything I can to make this show even better for you. Deal? For the last few minutes, he'd noticed faint movements along the tree line, shadows flickering between trunks. No shapes, no sound. Just the creeping sense that something was pacing him, just outside the headlight's reach. Mark had heard stories before, old truckers swapping tales over black coffee and cold pie. Stories about wolves, real ones that followed trucks in winter, waiting and watching. Some said the smarter ones could tell when a rig had trouble. That's when they came closer. He always thought it was just an exaggeration, until now. As the road curved left, the trees opened into a clearing, and that's when it appeared. A massive white wolf stepped onto the icy pavement, right into the headlights. Its fur shimmered like untouched snow. Its amber eyes glowed steady in the dark, not flickering, but focused. A long, faded scar marked its left cheek. This wasn't just a wolf. It felt like something more. Mark eased off the gas. The truck groaned but slowed, rolling to a stop as steam rose from the exhaust. For a moment, everything stood still. The wind returned, gently rattling the mirrors. Mark reached for the hazard lights, but stopped. Something told him not to, because the wolf didn't seem afraid. Or surprised. It was waiting. Then others appeared, shadows stepping out of the tree line. Frosty breath puffed from their muzzles, and their glowing eyes reflected the headlights like lanterns in the fog. Mark sat frozen, hands tight on the wheel. The heater pushed back the cold, but the air felt tense, like even the truck was holding its breath. The wolves didn't bark or growl. They circled the truck silently, tails low, heads tilted, eerily in sync. According to wildlife experts, wolves rarely surround vehicles, unless driven by hunger or instinct. But this felt different. No signs of fear or aggression, just purpose. Mark locked eyes with the white wolf, and in that moment, he felt something strange, as if it understood him. Not just instinct, something older, wiser. The white wolf took one slow step forward. That's when Mark realized he wasn't being hunted. He was being chosen. But why were they here? And what were they trying to say without making a single sound? In the silence, something shifted. Mark looked closer, not just at the white wolf, but at the others surrounding him. And suddenly, the picture became clear. These weren't hunters preparing to strike. They were survivors. Barely. Their ribs pressed against thin, tangled fur. Their steps were slow and heavy, like each one took more effort than they had left to give. One, a young female with silvery underfur, limped visibly. A dark patch marked her side, likely from an old wound. Another wolf raised its back paw, favoring it gently, the limb shaking from cold and strain. This winter had been cruel. More brutal than most. According to the National Weather Service, January had broken temperature records across the region, with deep snow and wind chills plunging well below -40. In these conditions, survival became a daily struggle. Deer, moose, and caribou had moved to lower ground weeks ago, chasing food and fleeing the storms. Smaller prey was buried, hidden, or gone. With little left to hunt, the wolves had been driven closer to something they'd always avoided: people. Mark understood what that meant. They hadn't come to attack. They had come because they had no other choice. And yet the white wolf, the alpha, still moved with purpose. Though thin and tired, he held himself with quiet strength. His movements were calm, almost careful, as he circled the truck. He sniffed at the tires, paused at the door, then stopped in front of the radiator, close enough for Mark to notice a small notch missing from the tip of his left ear, a mark perhaps from a long-ago fight for leadership. He lifted his head and looked directly through the windshield, and Mark felt it. It wasn't fear anymore. It was awe, the kind you feel when standing near something ancient, something wild, that the world had nearly forgotten. The wolves didn't beg, they didn't whimper, but their silence said enough. At that moment, Mark realized they weren't the danger. They were the warning. And whatever was coming next would change everything. Do you believe animals can sense who to trust? Let me know in the comments if you think the wolves saw something in Mark or if it was just survival. Then, just when it seemed the silence would stretch forever, one final act would change everything, a plea, not for mercy, but for help. The wolves shifted, not with aggression but with purpose, parting to form a path in the snow. From the trees, a she-wolf emerged, her silver-gray coat dulled by exhaustion. She walked slowly, each step draining her. In her mouth she carried a small, pale pup, limp and barely breathing. She placed the pup near the truck, then stepped back, sides heaving. For a long moment no one moved. The only sounds were the wind whispering through the trees and the hum of the truck engine. Mark looked down at the pup. Its chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Frost clung to its tiny whiskers. Its eyes remained closed. He recognized the signs: cold, hunger, and fatigue. Mark's hand moved slowly to the door handle. He didn't rush. He knew sudden movements could startle any wild animal, especially a mother. But the wolves didn't react. They just watched him. He opened the cab door. The cold hit him like a wall, but he stepped out, one careful foot at a time. His boots crunched in the snow. The wind tugged at his jacket as he walked toward the tiny form in the snow. The alpha stood still, eyes locked on him. Mark knelt beside the pup. Its fur was icy to the touch, but beneath it he felt faint warmth, still alive. Carefully he wrapped the pup in his coat. It didn't struggle. It let out a soft, fragile sound that stirred something deep within him. The white alpha took one slow step forward. He didn't growl. He didn't threaten. Instead, he leaned in and touched his nose gently to the pup's cheek, as if offering a blessing. Then he looked at Mark. Not with fear, not with the challenge, with trust. Time seemed to pause. A silent understanding passed between them. Mark had lost much in his life, his wife, his purpose, but now, in the heart of winter, surrounded by snow and silence, a pack of wild animals had given him something rare, a second chance, and he accepted it. Mark had a choice to make: walk away and leave nature to its course, or answer a call that no words had spoken. Mark climbed back into the cab with the tiny wolf tucked inside his coat. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing them off from the snowstorm outside. Inside, it was far from warm, but compared to the bitter cold out there, it felt like shelter. Mark placed the cub on the passenger seat and reached into his bag for the emergency thermos he always carried, filled with warm broth from that morning. He unscrewed the cap and dipped his fingers into the liquid, letting a few drops fall gently into the cub's half-open mouth. At first, nothing, then a soft swallow, then another. Mark let out a quiet breath. The cub stirred. Its body still trembled, but it shifted slightly, instinctively curling into the warmth of the jacket Mark had wrapped around it. It was so light, so fragile. He could feel its tiny heartbeat, fast but steady. In those golden eyes, barely open, there was no fear, only trust. Mark looked down and whispered. Outside, the storm raged on. But something inside that truck had changed. Not just the temperature, not just the odds. Mark had spent years on the road, years running from his past, from memories that haunted every quiet night. But at that moment, holding a helpless creature entrusted to him by the wild, something in him began to thaw. According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, gray wolf pups rely completely on their pack during the first few months of life. Without warmth, food, and protection, their survival through winter is unlikely. But this one had something more. He had Mark. And Mark had found something too. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He reached over and gently patted the little bundle curled next to him. The pup let out a soft sigh, nestling deeper into the folds of the coat, a sound so quiet yet so full of life that it brought a faint smile to Mark's face. Outside the windshield, the wolves had vanished into the storm. No tracks, no howls, just snow. Inside, the truck idled, a man and a cub. Alone, but not alone. If this story pulled at your heart like it did mine, go ahead and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories like this are worth sharing. That one moment in the snowstorm didn't just change the night, it changed Mark's entire future. 2 years had passed since that frozen night in the woods. The tiny cub he'd carried named him Nord, after the north wind that had carried him into his life. Nord became a strong, striking wolf, his silver fur thick and gleaming, his golden eyes still holding that same spark Mark had seen through the windshield when everything changed. The scars across Nord's body had faded, leaving only faint lines beneath his coat, reminders of a past that no longer defined him. Mark had changed too. The man who once wandered highways to escape his pain had found a reason to stay grounded. He still drove, but only short routes now, just far enough to keep his wheels turning, but close enough to come home each night. Because home mattered now. At first, the locals were unsure what to make of a man caring for a wolf. But as they watched Nord follow Mark like a shadow, gentle, loyal, and protective, their hesitation turned into curiosity. One neighbor, Anna, a retired veterinarian with a soft spot for animals, grew especially close to him. When Mark was away, Anna would help care for Nord. Over time, the bond between them deepened. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled outside their cabin like it once had through the trees, Nord would lift his head and let out a long, haunting howl. Mark never stopped him. He'd step outside, sit beside him on the porch, and rest his hand gently on Nord's neck. They'd sit in silence, gazing into the snow-covered woods. Maybe Nord was calling to his old pack. Maybe remembering the mother who risked everything to save him. Or maybe, deep in his bones, he just felt the wild calling back, like a lullaby from another life. But every time after the howl faded into the trees, Nord would nudge Mark's leg and rest at his feet. He always came back. Now, whenever Mark drives past that bend in the road, the place where the wolves first appeared, he slows down. Looks out into the trees. The forest looks the same, but he swears he still sees the faint outline of paw prints crossing the snow. Some say it's just memory. Others believe the white alpha still roams those woods, keeping watch over the road where two lives once met. Mark doesn't talk much about that night anymore, But every so often, when snow begins to fall and the wind stirs the pines, he looks at Nord and smiles. Because in the wilderness, where the wild and the wounded meet, sometimes the greatest rescue isn't the one you give, it's the one you never saw coming. If you found today's video interesting, don't hesitate to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Your support is very important to us. Be sure to check out the next video appearing on your screen. You're sure to love the content we bring. Please leave a comment about which country you'd like us to explore next. Thank you for watching, and see you in the latest video. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.